Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. NATO has strongly condemned attacks on its peacekeepers in northern Kosovo. 25 of its service personnel were wounded when they tried to intervene in clashes between police and Serb protesters. Our correspondent Guy Delorney says the demonstrators were angry at the installation of ethnic Albanian mayors.
The tension's been building for quite some time. There were mayoral elections in 4 majority Serb areas of North Kosovo. Ethnic Serb parties and ethnic Serb voters boycotted those elections. That resulted in a turnout of just 3.5%. And it also resulted in people from the ethnic Albanian minority in these areas being elected as mayors in these majority Serb areas.
The United States and Saudi Arabia have welcomed the extension of a ceasefire deal between Sudan's warring military factions for another 5 days. Washington and Riyadh announced the latest deal, as well as brokering the previous week-long truce. In a joint statement, they acknowledged that the ceasefire had not been fully observed. International observers say there wasn't a level playing field for Sunday's presidential runoff election in Turkey. Recep Tayyip Erdogan won 52% of the vote, but monitors from the OSCE said Mr. Erdogan had an unjustified advantage and some of his opponents had faced intimidation. Ola Gearin reports.
Neither the OSCE nor the opposition are disputing the outcome here. The election has crystallised the divisions in Turkey, where the economy is in crisis. Critics say the president has no solutions. The Turkish lira fell again to a record low on news of his victory. Experts accuse him of mismanaging the economy, resulting in rampant inflation. But his devoted supporters have given him 5 more years to shape Turkey in his image and theirs, religious, conservative and nationalist.
The former president of El Salvador, Mauricio Funes, has been sentenced to 14 years in prison for negotiating a truce with criminal gangs. Mr. Funes, who lives in Nicaragua, was sentenced in his absence. Phoebe Hobson reports.
Mauricio Funes led El Salvador from 2009 to 2014. He had denied negotiating with gangs in the hope of reducing the country's exceptionally high murder rate and gaining electoral advantage. He was found guilty along with his former security minister, David Munguia Payas, who is sentenced to 18 years in jail. Mr. Funes now lives in Nicaragua, where he has citizenship, meaning he's extremely unlikely to be extradited. El Salvador has been crippled by gang violence for years. The current president, Nayib Bukele, has imposed a year-long state of emergency and locked up tens of thousands of suspected gang members. The United States has accused him of secretly negotiating with gangs.
World News from the BBC. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Patriot air defences will help to defeat what he calls Russian terrorism. He suggested the US-supplied system could intercept 100% of missiles fired at Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky was speaking after Ukrainian officials said all 11 missiles launched at the Ukrainian capital on Monday morning had been shot down. President Biden has said the United States might impose sanctions on Uganda after it introduced a new anti-homosexuality law. Anyone convicted of having gay sex now faces life in prison. Mr. Biden described the legislation as shameful. Our North America correspondent David Willis has more detail.
The reaction from the White House has been very stern indeed. A 5-paragraph statement warning of a possible barring of Ugandan officials involved in implementing these sort of laws from accessing the United States of America. So very, very strong condemnation. And it's shared across the aisle, you might say, because we've also heard from the Republican senator from Texas, Ted Cruz. He said that this was a grotesque law and, as he put it, an abomination.
President Biden has said he believes a deal to increase the limit for US government borrowing has a very good chance of being approved by Congress. His administration has warned it will run out of funds unless measures to raise the debt ceiling are passed within the next week. On Sunday, Mr. Biden and the Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced an agreement that temporarily increases the debt ceiling while introducing federal spending cuts. The world's richest cricket championship, the Indian Premier League, has been won by the Chennai Super Kings. They beat the Gujarat Titans in a thrilling final in Ahmedabad in the early hours of Tuesday morning. The match had been postponed from Sunday because of heavy rain. It is Chennai's 5th IPL title. And that's the latest. BBC News.